Welcome, everybody, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. Can you remember the last time you avoided having a conversation because the perceived stakes were high? Now, I know I can. And the challenge is that we likely won't go back to that conversation, will we? And if left unattended and dealt with, it creates trust issues, resentment, and frustration. And as men, our greatest Achilles heel is talking about things that are important to us. And these are crucial conversations. When we learn how to have them, we can actually raise the level that we show up as a father, a husband, and a leader. Now, before we get into today's episode, I just want to remind you to hit like and subscribe and share on your favorite platform so you can stay updated on the latest content while helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I just want to say thank you. So now let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
As is customary, I like to start off by asking a couple of questions just to help us set the stage for this afternoon's talk. Have you ever avoided having a conversation because you didn't think it was going to go well? And if you learn how to have that conversation, would you turn around and do it? I think we can all agree that having uncomfortable conversations is a challenge for anyone. And as men, it's been challenging enough for us to open up, let alone have a conversation when the stakes are high. And well, gentlemen, we're going to shatter those excuses today, as my guest is a master facilitator in crucial conversations. And she's going to drop the mic on what we need to know to be prepared while raising our level and how we show up and create space for everyone. So allow me to introduce Tamara Kerr. Tamara Kerr's superpower is that she is an organizational development consultant, a coach, a master trainer, and a perfect parallel parker. Well, I'll have to see that. And a dialogue diva. And all of this was gained through her work, through her education at the University of Regina in Saskatchewan, Canada. That's my home province. In her education in social psychology, adult education, and business administration. She's got 30 years of collaboration with many of Canada's best companies, large and small. And in her consulting work, she provides training and coaching solutions that target unwritten, deep-seated sources of human behavior that fosters accountability, spurs open communication, and improved engagement in all aspects of her clients' lives. So welcome to the show, Tamara. How are things?
Thanks for having me, Alan. I'm great. Things are great. Life is good. Spring in Saskatchewan.
Yes, absolutely. So nice to see the sun in the longer days. It's just perfect. Listen, yeah. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say that when I do my men's work, one of the things that we talk about a lot is about having and being on a hero's quest. And I was hoping you'd be able to tell us about your quest and how it's shaped you to what you're doing today and how it's led your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, my initial quest as a young student was to find a job so that I could survive. And so I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with myself. And I got a job in a bank, and I loved working with people, but I did not love a 9-to-5 existence. And so I started looking for things that would challenge me intrinsically. And so I spent a lot of time coaching, working with other folks that reported to me, doing a lot of training. I was tapped to lead a couple of training programs as an opinion leader, and I really loved doing that. And so that is where I started to specialize. And I've had a lot of opportunities to work with a number of different skills and sales skills, service skills, coaching skills. And at some point, I was asked if I would consider supporting the delivery of crucial conversations, because it was being shared by a company called Shared Visions in Regina for Saskatchewan and Manitoba region. And they were very busy. And so would you be interested in subcontracting and doing this training? And I wasn't sure I wanted to. They said, you know what, how about just take the course and then you tell us if this is something that, you would like to support. And I took the course, and it was life altering. It completely changed my life. And I realized that it was in the training of it with others, it became the most fundamental experience of my life. And this is when I started to really connect with people, where we share our vulnerabilities, we share our challenges as human beings, we share our experiences, and we all have things that we can adapt to our lives and connect with over, how we've handled conversations poorly, how we have damaged relationships because of the ways we've shown up, intentionally or not intentionally. And so even though the skills are the same, and I might run, this particular course, every week or every couple of weeks, I've met hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people. And it's different every time I deliver, because the people are different, the experiences are different. But what is the same is the connection that people have by the end of it, the connection to their own experiences and how they might have contributed to conversations going poorly in the past, and what they can do differently. And it just it's very powerful. And so it's very rewarding. And so now it's my life's work. And so Crucial Learning, that offers the program, among others, is the company that I front here in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Central Prairies, basically. And their mission is to change lives by changing behavior. And we really believe that.
Yeah, 100%. I think it was just, we took this training through my work, and I was just so enthralled with it that I thought it's something that's so neat. And as I said in the introduction, and as men, we tend to clam up a bit. And so we're already starting a little bit describe what a crucial conversation is, but I thought if you could put a little bit more around that. So how would you describe what a crucial conversation is?
I would say crucial conversation is the perfect storm between sort of three simultaneous events. One, we have opposing opinions. So you and I disagree about something. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's called debate. But as soon as the stakes are high, we bring something extra to that debate. And that is strong emotions. And so, if we can't agree on the movie we want to watch, no big deal. We'll do your thing this time. We'll do my thing next time. It's fine, right? But when the stakes are high, you don't do that at work. You don't go, okay, well, we'll do your thing this time. You dig in. And as you do that, the emotions get stronger. You feel like you need to defend your position. You need to push your ideas across. You need to, get them across clearly. You want your thing to happen. And then there's an interesting thing that occurs with adrenaline, and the fight or flight response kicks in, and then we get dumbed down. And so then we go on autopilot, and our autopilot is basically what we call our style under stress. And we have a tendency to either clam up or blow up when adrenaline kicks in. So not only are we dumbed down, but that is we limit our choices in that moment. We think, well, I can be honest or kind. I can be respectful or candid. And that doesn't help us have those conversations in effective ways.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's what we kind of call that the fool's choice, or the sucker's choice, is like when you figure like, well, I don't want to blow up, so I'd better clam up. And neither of those are good options. So, but that's what happens when adrenaline kicks in. We limit our choices. We think black and white, right? And there's so much gray area that we could get to that would help us in our conversations with people.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you brought up the fool's choice. That was one of the pieces that really stuck with me, because we do tend to have as an or conversation. It's never an and conversation. I think that is so important for us. And so I was thinking with this, now you teach it in a work environment, but how badly is this type of work needed in personal lives and in relationships within the home?
This is my secret, is that these skills are geared toward the workplace. It is designed toward the workplace, because that is what makes it, a marketable course, right? Your organization sees the value in having that skill among it to change the culture. And when everybody's using the skills, your employee satisfaction goes up, your customer satisfaction goes up, you get more efficient, you get your productivity goes up, your safety incidents go down. And so it's extremely valuable in the workplace. But the thing I love is the secret when people come into the fold and they realize that, these skills are just as useful at home. And this is what I don't necessarily market, but guess what? If you're spending the time to learn these skills, you're probably going to see, yes, you're going to see results at work, but you're going to see things change at home in ways you couldn't even imagine. And that is, I think, where the beauty comes in, is that if you're practicing the skills at home, they'll come to you more readily at work. If you're practicing the skills at work, they'll come more readily to you at home. But quite often, people are already on their best behavior at work, believe it or not. And, we don't like career limiting moves. We want to make sure that, we're good role models, that we, I know it's my job to make sure that this crucial conversation goes well, right? I can't handle it how I might at home. Whereas you go home and like, these are the people that know you, love you. They're going to be there no matter what. So you're like, nah, gotta love me. And that was a learning for me, is that, I know I can handle my conversations while at work. And so that's why I felt like I was a good communicator. But once I took the course, I learned a couple things about myself. I work harder at using skills at work than I do at home, which is crazy because, those are the people I love. You think I would try harder with them. And not everybody's like that. Some people are, definitely work harder at home than they do at work. But then the other thing I learned about myself is that I would usually have my best conversation after the conversation. So whatever would go down, and then later, after adrenaline dissipates, I think, oh, why did I say that? Or sometimes we go to silence and we go, well, why didn't I say that? Why didn't I speak up for myself? Why didn't I share this or that? And it all comes down to psychological safety. And if it's not present, then we go to our style under stress.
Well, that's so true. And I think it's so important that as you think about it, and I like how you're framing this, because many of us, and I'm one of those as well, that unfortunately we take our loved ones for granted. So we think they can cut us a little bit more slack in how we communicate with them. But in reality, what we're doing is we're just digging a trench that soon can, if it's unwatched, can become a grave, and then the whole relationship is ended. And that's why I thought it was so important that we'd have this conversation to help my audience understand that while this may be geared for the workplace, I felt it was so important about how we can be better communicators. And one of the things I talk about with my men's work is getting to level 5 conversations. And to me, a level 5 conversation is that one where you're completely vulnerable. I've taken my heart and I've put it out in front of you and told you everything. I'm so vulnerable in trusting that you're just not going to squash it. And you can only get there if you know how to have these crucial conversations to get to that point. And so I think it's so important that we're doing this. Now, let me think about the next step. So I don't think any of us walk into a situation where we're already decided, well, maybe once in a while, but probably not very often, where we decided this is going to be a crucial conversation. We're already, the emotions high. So what would be some mistakes that we would make along the way that would turn a conversation that wasn't crucial into something that is extremely crucial now?
No, it happens so quickly. And it often happens before we even realize it's happening. You're having a normal conversation and all of a sudden there's so much emotion and like, what happened? What? Huh? And so, that does we get hit upside the head, I think, sometimes because we don't anticipate that it's going to be crucial. And then we're surprised by the reaction or response that we get. And then we react to the other person's reaction. So if you do open up and you are vulnerable and you say something that I do step on, and then you react because I'm trying to be vulnerable here and I just squashed, like you opened up your heart and I squashed it. And so you might have a very strong reaction. I didn't necessarily see that coming. And so then I react to your reaction, and then you react to mine, and we call that the downward spiral. And so what is really helpful is to start seeing the emotions when they first happen that indicate that maybe you do have a psychological safety problem. Because what we do is we miss those early warning signs. We miss the little subtle cues and clues that tell us we're going into a crucial conversation. And I mean, if you're talking about digging a hole, right? Like if we don't notice that we're pushing somebody's buttons and that they're starting to feel not safe, and they go to their style under stress, and we just keep at it. Like we are so, familiarity breeds mindlessness. We see something so often, don't notice it anymore. But the deeper we dig our hole, the harder it is to get out of it. And I mean, you're in a crucial conversation when they're hitting you over the head with the shovel, but right, you need to, but then it's too late. It's too hard to get out of that hole, right? The deeper it is, the harder it is to get out of it. So we need to notice when the emotional element has shifted in a way that normally we would probably react to with our own emotion, and instead see it for what it is, a sign of a safety problem. So for instance, you and I are having a conversation. You're very, you're pleasant, you're agreeable, we're having a good conversation. And then I start to notice you starting to control the conversation and maybe get, a little bit defensive or push your point across. And it's not normal behavior. It's not typical behavior for you. In the past, I would look at that and think, don't control me. Like, you can't tell me what we should and shouldn't do. And I would then get my back up. But I started to realize that is a sign that maybe you're not feeling safe. That might be you using your style under stress. And I think with men, there definitely is, the tendency to go to silence, which is, I don't want to, I don't want to make things worse. I better not say anything. Right. You're right. You're right. You're always right. Just leave it at that. And so we have to push in those relationships to get to that, but women don't always make it safe to do that. And so if your style under stress, though, is, to head toward, controlling or what have you, that can push buttons. And we tend to look at that as we align that with the person's personality versus, their style under stress. So, why are you being a controlling jerk? Why you're not my dad. Don't tell me what to do. Right. And so now I've learned to notice that behavior has shifted. Aha. Now I'm going to get curious about it. I'm going to go, you know what? Sometimes we try to control the outcome of conversations because I'm feeling stressed and out of control. So the way we try to protect ourselves can in many ways push other people's buttons. And so unless you're astute at recognizing those for what they are, your conversation can start to get hotter and hotter until, it ends up somewhere you don't want it to be.
Absolutely. And I think I was just noticing a couple of things there. One was a couple of notes I made was on triggers, right? It's the triggers for us, our own personal triggers, and what's setting it up, because they can be very subtle, like you were saying. And then, but also having a bit of emotional intelligence work in there as well, right? Because to recognize that things have changed either in tonality or body language or something, and that we're more conscious. And I think you're absolutely right. We do get into our routines in our conversations, and we don't necessarily spend that time to really think about what's happening within the conversation. So that kind of leads me. Go ahead. I
know you have a good transition, but honestly, I think that one of the reasons why we struggle with our personal relationships, I was going to say more so than we do at work. It's not necessarily more so. Obviously, the emotional connection is there. You expect more from your loved ones than you do from the people at work. But we have the pattern that happens when you've been with somebody for a long time and you live together, and there's a lot of water under the bridge. We get into these habits of how we communicate. And so that is often why men go, I'm not answering that. Like, how do I look? Whoa, wee you, danger, Will Robinson. And And so, yeah, we get into these patterns of communication that we can break out of, but it will take time. The longer you have history with somebody, the more work you have to do to earn the trust that you are trying to get to psychological safety. And so I think sometimes men don't get to the point where they start making those changes until they are hit with the shovel, right? Like, the spouse is upset or wants to leave, or, they risk losing everything or whatever. And that's when, people might have already been starting to pull away. So what I would say is, no matter how much effort you make, you still have to turn around the Titanic, right? So it still is going to take time to rebuild that trust. But the more you can do that early on, obviously the better.
Yeah, love the analogy of the Titanic, because that's exactly what it is. And I know, as from I'm in my mid 50s, so a lot of guys in my age were raised where we were told to be quiet, and we weren't allowed to express emotion, and so we get challenged as we're in our relationships to be able to open up and do that. And unfortunately, some of the work that, fortunately and unfortunately, is that some of the work that I do with men, they're going through some significant emotional event in their life. And so because they've been trained and they don't have the new habit to develop the new habits. That's why I think these types of conversations, what we're doing today, is so important for everyone involved, because it doesn't help anyone in the relationship when it starts to fall apart, when we fall back on old habits. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, we're really talking about conversations, but what I really liked about the work that you're doing is that you also focused on dialogue, and that there's a difference between having a conversation and having a dialogue. And I thought if you could explain that to the audience on what the differences are and what we should be looking for.
Yeah, maybe it's just labeling. I don't know if there's a difference between conversation and dialogue, or discussion and dialogue, but for me, dialogue is the free flow of meaning between two or more people. So I'm sharing and you're sharing. We're both contributing. Whereas what tends to happen when we are upset is we monologue. And so I just tell you everything that I'm thinking and feeling, maybe it's just coming from wherever it is, no filter, and often poor motives. And so, you needed to know how I felt. And then, we walk away. And that is not what we're talking about when we say dialogue. We want you to not choose to clam up or to blow up. We want you to go, okay, instead of thinking, should I be honest or kind? Should I be candid or respectful? We want you to think, how can I be honest and kind? How can I be candid here, but also be respectful? And, this is kind of interesting timing, because as we're doing this recording, yesterday was the Oscars, and Will Smith went up and smacked Chris Rock across the face for disrespecting his wife. And what often happens is that we don't have the conversations we should be having. We're going to silence. We squash it. And then the straw breaks the camel's back. Something little happens. We explode. And then the other person is like, why are you getting so upset over such a little thing? And it's not a little thing. It's a bunch of little things. It's a bunch of big things, but we've never talked about it. And so it becomes combustible. Like we squash it. We put a lid on it. And, and I think that in many ways, as you said, because men aren't taught necessarily at your age, you wouldn't have been taught to be vulnerable, to share your vulnerability, to say how you're feeling in safe ways. And so you don't say, because you're fearful of the repercussions. And so then, so much gets bottled up that you live with until one day maybe you do explode over something little, or maybe it's big, but it's like, I feel like Will Smith was sticking up for his wife, and he did feel disrespected, and that's all fair. But because he chose in that moment to put hands on Chris Rock and then yell in front of everybody obscenities, like he obviously felt bad later that's how he chose to handle that. And that's what ends up happening, is then our bad behavior becomes the focus of attention versus the thing we wanted to bring up in the first place. And so you lose influence. if he had just, I mean, in retrospect, if he had known he was going to win the Oscar, he would have probably said, you know what, I'll say what I need to say when I get up there on the podium, or I'll meet you at the after party. But what happened was adrenaline kicked in and his fight or flight response kicked in, and there was no barrier between him and Chris, and off he went. And so, this ends up, that kind of emotion, when it's bottled up for too long, it's going to come out in ways that we would prefer it not to. And you could tell later that he was ashamed of how he handled it. But then we justify when we handle things poorly. And so a lot of people on social media right now are like, yeah, I mean, if you disrespect my wife, that's what's going to happen, right? But if we really think about, if I were in this situation, how would I want to handle myself, and what would the outcome be? I think we would choose differently. There is a way for us to practice changing our responses in moments when we are under the influence of adrenaline, so that we can get better results while strengthening our important relationships. And nobody, male, female, or otherwise, learns that very well as children and humans.
For sure not. Yeah, for sure not. I was just thinking it's just so challenging then, and I've seen lots of clips of that, and it's important for us to recognize that, and what you're pointing out is that it wasn't necessarily that was the piece, that was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back, but there's so much more going on that we're unaware of, right? And so then that reacts. And so that's also a good point for us to recognize that when we are having a conversation or trying to have a dialogue and creating that space where everyone gets an opportunity to participate, that someone may not be in that same place as we are at that moment. And can we, and can we work, how do we work with them to pull them into that place? And it may mean that we need to take a step back and re-engage in another moment. And so that kind of leads me into thinking about some of the skills that you were teaching us through it. And I think there's eight crucial skills that we need to develop. And I just thought if we could go through them briefly, what the 8 skills are, and want to get a chance to understand them. Yeah,
for sure. There might be 9, so you might have to come back to class. Okay. We often don't look at action planning as the skill piece, but our goal in teaching the skills of how to have effective crucial conversations is to make sure that we do get unstuck, that we get results. And the goal of crucial conversations isn't to have a good conversation. It is to get unstuck while strengthening relationships, which means like we can move to power. We can bully people, we can threaten people, and maybe they'll back off, maybe it'll stop disrespecting your wife or whatever. But if we're trying to actually get a long-term change without damaging relationships, then we have to work at that. And you can't pull rank or move to power in order to do that, right? So the skills are really important. All of the skills are meant to, they do double duty. One, if you're under the influence of adrenaline, the way to help that adrenaline dissipate is to give your brain a job to do or a problem to solve. And so all of the skills do that. It's concentrated questions or thoughts that you can pose to your brain to help prepare you for the conversation. And also when your brain is active, then the blood flow redirects to where it's needed. And so for fight or flight, it's needed in your fists and your, it's going to all your extremities, and your brain gets shut down. And so then, your brain gets shut down, and we go, okay, go have your most important conversation. Well, you're not going to show up in the best way, right? So we have to re-engage your brain. And so that starts with thinking, what kind of conversation is this? Is this just, a one-off conversation? We've never had this issue before. We'll talk about that. Or is there a pattern? And if I just go back to Will and Chris, there was a pattern of him disrespecting their family. And so then you go, okay, this is a different, maybe that joke wasn't a bad joke. Like actually Will Smith laughed at the joke, and then he saw Jada's face and he's like, oh, maybe that wasn't funny. Right. And so then Chris said, I just love this example so much. It's so timely that this happened last night, but Chris said it was a G.I. Jane joke. Like in and of itself, it wouldn't have been disrespectful, but she didn't make the choice to shave her head for a movie role, right? She's suffering from an autoimmune disorder, which has been very painful for her emotionally. So, but he laughed at first, and then he realized, oh, maybe that wasn't funny. So if he had talked to Chris, then they could have said, there's a pattern of you disrespecting. So it's not this particular joke, funny, not funny, whatever. It is the other. It's in addition to all the other things. I'm feeling like there's a lack of respect, and that's a different conversation. Sometimes we blow up over something little, and we go, "What's the big deal?" And you know what? There's more to it. There's a deeper seated issue, right? And I think I told you that my family had a four-way mutual, like complete lose your mind breakdown one day over who gets to eat the last hash brown patty. Like, is it about the hash browns? No. So, well, what is it? Like, obviously, we're cooped up with COVID, the stress or whatever. And so, sometimes you go, why are you reacting so strongly to something that isn't that big a deal? It's usually there's something more to it. So we have to have the right conversation. That's one. We also, this is the biggest piece that I would say is the greatest revelation that people have in class is mastering my stories. The stories we tell ourselves about why people are doing what they're doing or saying what they're saying makes things so much worse. And as human beings, it's not unusual for us to go, what's the worst and most personal way I can take this? And then that's how we react or respond. But often we tell ourselves stories about why people are doing what they're doing, but really the only way to know is to ask them why this is happening. But our stories often keep us from that conversation because we go, I know why you're doing what you're doing. You just like to make my life miserable, or you like to see me suffer or whatever. And then you tell your friends and they go, yeah, that's right. And you go, yeah. And so we can justify our behavior. And Will has a lot of people around him right now that are saying, yes, you did the right thing. And as long as you have that in your ear, you don't have to make any changes because, there are people that are telling you I would have done that too. And so therefore that makes it okay. The stories we tell ourselves can increase the amount of time that we are dumbed down by adrenaline, right? Adrenaline can dissipate from your system in 90 seconds, but you can have adrenaline coursing for 3 full hours or or longer because of what you tell yourself that perpetuates it. And so could you tell yourself a different story so you get a different feeling? Instead of what's the worst and most personal way I could take this, maybe you could say, why would a reasonable, decent, rational person have done that? Well, maybe there's something going on I don't know about. Maybe there's more to the story or what have you. And so you can get yourself into a place of curiosity and bring that to a conversation versus judgment, because judgment then impacts psychological safety. And you need to have psychological safety in order to expect other people to be vulnerable enough to tell you what really is going on. So mastering my stories is huge. Starting with good intentions is big too. I think when we're surprised by crucial conversations, our motives degrade really quickly. Like, I want to win an argument, or I want to defend myself, or I want to vent, or I want you to feel as badly as I do. And so then we throw stuff out that we don't really even believe, but we're just trying to hurt the other person or whatever, because adrenaline dumbs us down and because we are sensitive inside. But maybe, and I think men especially, a lot of emotions come out as anger. Mm-hmm. And that's not understood by other people. So why are you so angry? Is really, I'm hurt. I'm hurt. And this is a safe way to express that. And if I don't bring psychological safety to the conversation, you won't share the hurt part with me. You'll just get more angry and more defensive. And then the conversation gets worse and worse. And so that's really big, is to think, what are my good intentions for this conversation? What am I trying to accomplish here? And for me, a lot of times that my conversations with my husband would degrade. We both were trying to defend ourselves and really just be heard, but neither of us were listening, right? Yeah. And so when you can think, well, what I really want here from this conversation? The very first time I used the skill, I thought, well, I would want us to be able to disagree reasonably and rationally and like we love each other. But what I was doing was blaming and defending and pointing fingers and all the things that ruin psychological safety. So if you know what your good intentions are, your behavior often follows. So if I thought I want us to be able to disagree reasonably and rationally and like we love each other, maybe that's how I should be showing up in this conversation. And so that's big. Sharing your good intentions is big, because if the other person is like, what's the worst, most personal way I can take this? And they're going to bring that to the conversation. Whereas you want them to know what your good intentions are. And if you have them and you can share them, you're going to get a lot further. All that stuff happens sort of before you even open your mouth. The way you say what you need to say is important too. And quite often people push back because they think, well, I'm not good at sugarcoating. And that's not what we're about either. We want you to be able to say what you need to say, but there are ways you can say it in more respectful ways, right? You can show up differently. Like Will was yelling, keep my wife's name out your effing mouth, right? And he was like, and he could have just said, that was super disrespectful what you just said to my wife about this, or whatever. Like, hey. And so the way we say things is important. Facts are helpful, changing our stories. But what we really want to do is we want to share how we see things. And then we want to work really hard at not just sharing, but asking for the other person to share their perspective and understanding where they're coming from. And, when things degrade, when the motives degrade and we're just trying to, defend our position, we're not listening to each other. And that's where the magic happens, is when you actually are working at trying to understand each other, trying to listen to each other, trying to see, the differences in perspective. Like, if I give you an example of some things that would be crucial conversations, right? Debates over child rearing. Let's say, one of us wants our kid to go to French immersion and the other one is like, hell no, we're not doing that. Or I want to be able to homeschool my kid and you don't want that at all. They're going to be weird. I want them to be, in a normal scenario. Or right now we're just deciding on what kind of car to buy. And what about how we spend our money, or how we integrate our relatives into our lives? Or this is big, because this is hard for people to talk about, especially men, and that is our love languages, right? So what feels like love to us, and there are many different we differ in many ways. And so if my love language differs from yours, we're not giving each other what the other person wants, we're giving each other what we want. And so I want conversation, you want sex. It's like we're on different pages. So it's helpful to show, there was an example here, there was a situation there. And then yesterday when I said this, you said that, and I don't know what's going on, but the story I'm telling myself is that maybe you don't want to spend time with me. How do you see it? And that allows you to get your meaning out there, your perspective, so that then you can hear the other person's perspective. And that's when we start to share from a place of vulnerability versus a place of like defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the way we say things is important. Maintaining that psychological safety is important. Apologizing if you've made a mistake or if you've disrespected somebody. Chris could have apologized immediately before Will got out of his chair. Instead, he defended himself. He could have said, "Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. That was offside, maybe," and whatever. I might not have changed the outcome, but we can contrast. If sometimes people they feel disrespected when it wasn't your intention, which is probably, what happened there. But you can remove the misunderstanding, replace it with your good intentions, which you've already thought about, which is helpful.
Yeah.
We want to look for those little signs, that cues and clues I was telling you about earlier.
Yeah.
You want to make
absolutely.
sure that you work as hard at getting the other person to open up and share as you do in sharing your perspective and taking responsibility for all of that meaning.
100%. And there's so many, we've stitched in the skills in there. And I think it's really important that as people go back to listen to this, that they'd listen to this last little bit, because Tamara just dropped the mic right there on exactly on how we can really have a crucial conversation and create that space to allow both participants to be able to at least participate and get an understanding of what's going on. I think that was so awesome. And when you teach this class, though, what are you finding that your students say is the greatest revelation that they get in, that they're taking away from the class?
The difference between facts and stories is 100%. The biggest thing that people point out is, I'm telling stories. Like, yeah, we all do. Like, why did he just say that? Why did he just do that? Why didn't he do this? Why is she, freaking out over something so small or whatever? We try to make sense of neutral events. And the way we make sense of them is we go, what is the worst and most personal way I can take this? And so instead, you can go give the other person the benefit of the doubt. Change your story to tell yourself a different story, get a different feeling, right? We all walk down our paths differently. Here's an example. I was teaching a course in another province, and I left a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old home with my husband. I couldn't get home right away after the course ended. I had to spend the night. So I went shopping and it was Christmas, and I was thinking, this is a good time to get some of that done, whatever. Anyway, I phoned home at the time where I thought it would be a good time to talk and get everybody. And I didn't get him, my husband. And so I left a message saying, I'm just at the mall shopping. Call me when it's good for you. And then time went on and he never called me back. And I thought, well, now they're going to be in the bath and I don't know what's happening. So I called again and he answered like this. Yeah, it's not a good time. I'll call you back. Click. And so I immediately started telling myself a story like, what? Here I am, so far away from home, all by myself, and you all are together and you don't even miss me enough to call me, and I phone you and you hang up on me, and I can't believe I'm out here all by myself. And then I started thinking, okay, I feel emotional. I must be telling myself a story. What's the story I'm telling myself? And then I thought, what's a different story? And I put myself in his shoes and I thought, well, he's there with 2 little human tornadoes that miss their mom. And it's stressful for him. I said, call me when it works for you. And then I called anyway. And I'm here. Like he was thinking, you're there in a hotel. You're shopping. You're whipping it up. I'm wrestling these kids. And so, there were 2 different perspectives of what was happening there. And it took 20 minutes before he called back and he just said, I'm so sorry. I am stressed. And I was like, no kidding. I totally get that. But it took me 20 minutes to reframe how I was seeing things. And so I'm faster at it now. I'm better at it now. But tell yourself a different story, get a different feeling. If you can say, why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person just hang up on his wife? And you're like, put yourself aside, put your ego aside, and put yourself into their shoes. Like maybe there's something going on you don't know about, but get to a place of curiosity and then you can talk about it, right? But our emotions kick in so fast and they get us in so much trouble. And that's, what can tend to happen in terms of the physical violence. But there is a moment between stimulus and response where you can choose how you're going to react.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the situation that we're talking about today with the Oscars too, I think, a lot of people did say to me, men especially, if you disrespect my wife like that, that's exactly what's going to happen. But we do have a choice to how we respond to things. One choice is going to be more favorable for others' impressions of us, right? Mm-hmm. Or you respond with violence, but you can't you can't get out of jail because you pummeled some guy to death, by saying, well, anybody would have done it. Like, there's a choice. You have a choice. And that's why you can choose not to get physical. But what do you do instead? And that's really where these skills come in, is they all work together to try to get you to a place where you can move to the other side without having to go to move to violence, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that, women in general are taught to do that more, where we're raised differently. We're the nurturers, we're the caregivers, we're the mediators, right? We're the referees. And so in many cases, like, that's how men are taught to defend themselves in the playground, in the hockey rink, whatever. And so things are changing.
Yeah.
Things are definitely changing, but there are skills that lie between stimulus and response, where you can choose how you want to show up. And the unfortunate part is that on what could have been the best day of his career, the pinnacle of his career, accepting an Oscar for Best Actor, he has you could tell the shame of what he had just done in front of his peers. And that is the part, I mean, so be it if he's like, yep, I wouldn't do anything differently, that's fine. But I gathered from the speech that he wasn't proud of himself. And that's what I'm talking about, right? I want you to be able to say what you need to say in a way that you can look back on and say, I said that in the best possible way I could, right? Yeah. And even if you get a strong reaction, which could definitely still happen, you wouldn't lose sleep at night regretting how you handled the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. The days of, I think there's still lots of chivalry in today's world, where defending our wife's honor can be done, and could be done in so many different ways. And I completely agree with you. Well, at first blush, when I saw it, I thought, yeah, maybe that's how I would react. But when I take a step back, because I've been at that point in my life once before, where the emotion was so high, and things I couldn't control the reactions that I was having. That today, sitting there and listening to that and watching that and wondering, how more effective it could have been had Will just stayed in his seat and called out Chris from his seat without you having to use profanity, and called him out and just, Chris, that's not funny. Yeah. And could have said that a few times. And I think the level of who he is as an individual would have truly shone through of everything else that he stands for. And hopefully this isn't one thing that ends up by ultimately defining who he is, but it can be. It's one of those instances we can have in our life. And then in a spur of a moment, all of a sudden now we're defined by how we reacted.
Well, we're divided in many ways today. Think by the time you're listening to this podcast, maybe things will have changed, but we're divided today as to who was the victim here.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have happened at all had there been one moment of thought, how do I want to handle this in a way that is respectful and honest? And he could have easily said, what you just said was disrespectful to my wife, and I would like you to apologize. She has an autoimmune disorder, and you just called that out in front of her peers, and that's not cool. Or whatever. Mm-hmm. You can get there. You can get to the point where you can say what you need to say, even if you are, in the heat of the moment. But that's why, is because now his bad behavior is the focus of attention here. And so people are debating it and discussing it. And that didn't have to happen at all. No. And so we have the ability to choose our responses. And I think respect is always possible.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree with that, Tamara. There's so much more we could talk on. We could go for hours, but I don't think we'll do that today. But I just wanted to, as a parting piece, one last question was, of everything that we've talked about today, one thing you would recommend as a takeaway for our audience to remember?
I would say that if you're heading into a crucial conversation or you're surprised by a crucial conversation. Either way, you're in a discussion that gets heated. If you could think, what ultimately do I want to accomplish here long term? Like in the heat of the moment, you're going to be like, I want to win an argument, or I want to avoid an argument. But instead, if you could think, what do I really want here? And you could share those good intentions in a way that is somewhat vulnerable. You know what? We're both defending ourselves. And honestly, this is really important to me. And I care about how this goes. And I care about you. And I want to make sure that we're both happy with the outcome here. And so, I don't want us to attack each other. And, I want to hear everything you have to say. If you can be honest and vulnerable and bring that good intention to the conversation, people will give you a break on the skills because they know that you care enough about them to try to do your best, whether or not you do everything perfectly in retrospect. So that's number one, I think.
Right on. Perfect. I just want to say thank you so much, Tamara, for spending time with me today. And crucial conversations is definitely a skill everyone can develop. And you've shared some amazing insight into what they can do, what the conversations are about, and how we can create space for everyone to learn and grow as we work on this skill. And by practicing these skills, more couples and families will be able to raise the level of their intimacy as well as in their communities, and create a place where everyone can have a dialogue instead of just a conversation. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. If folks were wanting to reach out and get a hold of you and take some of your training, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, you just send me an email or go to my website. I'm Tamara at tamarakerr.com. So TamaraKerr.com. Just send me a note. And I would love to hear from you personally or professionally. There are options at all different price points for individuals and teams. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it. And I always love talking about this stuff. It makes me so happy. I'm so glad that you're bringing these kinds of thoughts and skills to a whole community of men who are working just as hard as they can, to show up in good ways. Excellent. I appreciate that.
You bet. Well, thank you so much. And I'll make sure to put all this information, all of Tamara's information in the show notes to be able to get it, be able to reach out to her. I would highly recommend it. I've taken this training. It is some of the best training of all my career. I would say it's in the top 2 training that I've had. And I just want to say thank you so much, Tamara. It was outstanding and really enjoyed having you today.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.